If you're new to the channel, take a second to hit that like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you'd stand your ground beside humanity when the galaxy itself burns. This is the story of a monster who carried a man through fire, and how that man taught the monster what it means to be human. The sky over Korshan was burning. Entire continents glowed like coals under the bombardment, cities reduced to skeletons of molten steel. What had once been a world of oceans and towers now screamed under the weight of collapsing atmospheres. And amid that firestorm, a medic ran. Captain Elias Ward sprinted through the ruins with a pack full of nanite injectors and plasma sealants, the armband of the Terran Relief Corps bright against the soot. Every breath felt like swallowing ash. His orders were simple: save who you can, human or Zarth. It didn't matter anymore, but orders meant little when the ground itself was a furnace. He ducked into the remains of a shattered bunker, its ceiling buckled like a crushed can. Inside, 4 wounded soldiers lay in a line. 2 human, 1 Zarthian scout, and a coalition drone still humming weakly. Ward didn't hesitate. He knelt beside the nearest and went to work, hands steady even as tremors shook dust from the ceiling. "You're insane, Ward," one of the soldiers coughed. "They'll level this place in minutes." Ward's voice was calm, deliberate. "Then we better make those minutes count." He sealed a wound, stabilized the Zarthian's breathing, and cut power to the drone before its core went critical. The air reeked of ozone and blood. And then, through the rumble of collapsing metal, came a sound like thunder given form, a deep, resonant growl that made the very air vibrate. Ward looked up. Something vast moved beyond the broken wall. A shadow in the firelight, walking upright on taloned legs, armored hide glistening red. It stooped to fit through the breach, and the bunker seemed to shrink around it. The creature's eyes were molten amber. Its voice was gravel dragged over steel. "Human medic," it said, the words careful, heavy with accent. "You should not be here." Ward didn't flinch. He'd seen the vids, heard the name whispered by soldiers and children alike. Tarkeshere, the Butcher of Elyon, the warlord who had ended 7 campaigns by personally tearing fleets apart. The predator that made whole systems surrender. "I'm not a soldier," Ward replied, still working. "I'm here to stop people from dying." Tarkeshere tilted his head, nostrils flaring as if scenting the absurdity of the statement. "On this world all things die." "Then I'll be busy," Ward said. His tone was flat, but his hands didn't slow. The predator watched, something flickering behind those bestial eyes. In all his campaigns, no one had ever ignored him. Yet this small, soft creature dared to turn his back and keep working. When another tremor rocked the bunker, Tarkeshere reached out instinctively, one clawed hand bracing the wall above Ward's head to keep it from collapsing. Ward glanced up. "Appreciate that." "You fear me not," Tarkeshere said. "I've seen worse." The predator's maw twitched, almost a smile. "Impossible." Ward looked him dead in the eye. "Try watching a child bleed out because command wouldn't lift a ceasefire. You learn what real monsters look like." For a long moment, the only sound was the low crackle of distant fire. Then Tarkeshere spoke again, quieter. "You would treat even my kind?" "If you're dying, yeah." Ward sealed the last wound and stood. "Somebody has to stop the fire." The predator studied him, the words digging somewhere deep beneath his armor. The human was unarmed, fragile, barely half his height, and yet there was no tremor of fear in his heartbeat. Only determination. Outside, thunder rolled. No, not thunder. Orbital bombardment. The ceasefire had broken. Through the shattered ceiling, streaks of plasma rained from orbit, burning the horizon white. Tarkeshere's nostrils flared. "Your people lied. They promised peace." Ward looked toward the light. Maybe someone didn't get the memo. The ground convulsed, tearing open. The bunker began to collapse. Tarkeshere roared, a sound that seemed to tear the fire itself apart, and swept Ward into his arms like a doll. The medic shouted in protest, but the predator leapt through the wall just as the structure imploded behind them. The night outside was chaos. Entire regiments vaporized by orbital fire. Airships falling from the sky. Tarkeshere moved with impossible speed, his bulk shielding Ward from the rain of molten debris. Ward pounded at his chest. "Put me down. I can't help anyone if I'm being carried like cargo." "You will die," Tarkeshere bellowed. "Then let me die doing my job." The words hit harder than any weapon. Tarkeshere slowed, then stopped. The human's pulse beat against his claws, fast, defiant. All his life, he had crushed armies who ran from him in terror. And here was one who ran toward death without hesitation. Something old inside him cracked. He crouched, lowering Ward to the ground. "Where?" Ward pointed toward the burning horizon. Med evac post 3 clicks north. If we make it there we can pull others out. The Predator nodded once. Then we go together. Ward slung his pack, already moving. You sure? Pretty sure half the troops out there will shoot you on sight. Let them try, Tarkeshere said. The words were calm, not boastful, simply true. They ran through the inferno side by side. Tarkeshere crushed falling debris underfoot, clearing paths Ward could sprint through. Ward threw himself from patient to patient, dragging the wounded from burning trenches, patching them as Tarkeshere shielded them from fire. A strange rhythm formed between them, brutal efficiency paired with fragile compassion. When another bombardment wave struck nearby, the shockwave hurled them into the dirt. Ward's ears rang. Tarkeshere rose over him, half his armor molten, one arm limp. He reached for Ward again, but this time not as a guardian, not as a monster, simply as someone who refused to leave another behind. Ward stared at him through the haze. Why? He rasped. The Predator's voice was a growl wrapped in pain. Because you stopped running from me. Overhead, the bombardment ceased as suddenly as it had begun, leaving only firelight and silence. In that silence, a bond was forged, not of species or command, but of shared defiance against extinction itself. Ward wiped the blood from his face. You got a name I can pronounce? Tarkeshere, the Predator said. It means, one who survived. Ward gave a weary grin. Elias Ward. That means, the guy who's gonna need a new pair of lungs after this. For the first time in his life, Tarkeshere laughed, a deep, rough sound that shook the air. And somewhere above the burning clouds, the orbiting fleets hesitated, confused by the sudden stillness below, unaware that on the ruins of Korshan, a human medic and the galaxy's deadliest predator had just taken the first step toward ending the war. The wind carried their laughter through the smoke, soft, absurd, human, and for a fleeting moment the fire didn't win. The storm over Korshan had not stopped burning for 3 days. The bombardment had stripped the planet of color, leaving only shades of black, red, and the deep orange glow of dying cities. Elias Ward moved through the wreckage like a ghost, coughing blood into his mask as he checked the pulse of another fallen soldier. His hands were raw, trembling from exhaustion, but he kept going. Somewhere behind him, Tarkeshere followed in silence, the ground shaking with each step of the creature's massive frame. They were both survivors of the impossible. Their partnership, if one could call it that, was born not of choice but necessity. Still, as they crossed the wasteland toward the northern evacuation point, something unspoken bound them together, a silent agreement to keep the other alive no matter the cost. Ward stopped to check a motion tracker. We're getting close, he muttered, mostly to himself. If the evac site's still standing, there might be shuttles. Tarkeshere's voice rumbled behind him, low and distant. Your people may not welcome me. Ward gave a tired laugh. You saved my life, big guy. They'll just have to deal with it. The Predator tilted his head. You believe gratitude outweighs fear. I believe people can surprise you, Ward said, pressing forward through the ash. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint, distorted echoes of screams. Ward's heart tightened. He had learned to recognize the sound of plasma wounds even through the static of distant battle. He ran toward it without hesitation. Tarkeshere followed, moving like a dark wave of muscle and armor. They found a collapsed trench filled with bodies, human and Zarth alike. A few still breathed. Ward slid into the crater, ripping open his medpack. Tarkeshere knelt beside him, watching as Ward stabilized a human soldier whose face was half burned away. The soldier's terrified gaze flicked toward the towering Predator and then back to Ward. He's with me, Ward said quickly, injecting the soldier with nanites. Don't panic. Breathe. The man tried to speak but fell unconscious. Tarkeshere reached out, his claws trembling slightly as he moved a stone off another body. The sight of the Predator handling the wounded with such precision felt surreal, like watching a hurricane cradle a candle. Ward caught his expression. You've done this before, haven't you? Tarkeshere paused. No. I have only caused such wounds. Ward said nothing for a long time, just kept working, his movement steady. Finally he said quietly, You're doing fine. That simple sentence hung between them, heavier than the smoke. Tarkeshere didn't understand why those words stirred something like pain. For years he had lived as a weapon, a tool of conquest, his worth measured in destruction. No one had ever told him he was doing fine. When the last patient was stable, Ward wiped soot from his face and leaned against a rock. I don't know what's worse, he said, voice rough. The dying or the ones who did this. Tarkeshere crouched beside him. You humans fight as if death is an inconvenience. I once thought that made you weak. Now I see it makes you relentless. Ward glanced at him. You really think this war can end? I ended it once, Tarkeshere said, staring into the burning distance. By killing enough that none dared rise again. That's not peace, Ward replied. That's exhaustion. The predator's jaw tightened. Then what is peace, human? Maybe it's what we're doing right now, Ward said softly. Keeping one more person alive. They sat in silence as the fires crackled around them. Above, ships groaned in the sky, shifting formation. The bombardment had slowed. Ward took a shaky breath, daring to hope. Then Tarkeshere's ears twitched. He heard something, movement close. Down, the predator growled, pushing Ward aside just as a beam of plasma scorched the rock they'd been sitting on. Human soldiers emerged from the smoke, rifles raised, faces twisted with fear. Contact. Hostile Zarth, one shouted. Ward jumped up, waving his arms. Hold your fire. He's not hostile. But panic was louder than reason. The soldiers opened fire. Bolts of blue plasma ricocheted off Tarkeshere's armor. He roared, a sound that made the very air ripple, but he didn't strike back. Ward grabbed the nearest shooter, screaming, "Stop! He's saving lives, damn it!" One soldier hesitated, lowering his rifle. Another didn't. A plasma bolt hit Ward's shoulder, spinning him to the ground. He hit hard, the taste of iron filling his mouth. Tarkeshere froze for a fraction of a second. Then something primal broke loose. He charged forward, a living wall of fury. Weapons shattered against his armor. Soldiers scattered, terrified. But before he could reach them, Ward's voice cut through the chaos. Weak, pained, but commanding. Tarkeshere. Don't. The predator stopped mid-stride, trembling. Smoke curled around his claws. He turned slowly, looking back at Ward, who was trying to push himself upright, blood dripping down his sleeve. They're scared, Ward rasped. Don't make them right. Tarkeshere stared at him, chest heaving. The silence stretched until the soldiers lowered their weapons. The medic's authority was small, but it was enough. Tarkeshere knelt beside Ward, his massive hand hovering uncertainly. You are injured. I'll live, Ward said. Can't say the same for my uniform. Despite himself, Tarkeshere let out a low, rumbling sound, half growl, half amusement. Ward leaned back against a piece of wreckage, breathing hard. Guess that answers your question, he said between coughs. They don't welcome you. The predator regarded him for a long moment. Yet you still defend them. Because someone has to, Ward said. You think peace just happens? Somebody has to hold the line between what we are and what we could be. Tarkeshere's gaze lingered on him. You protect even those who harm you. Yeah, Ward said. That's the deal. For the first time in his long, brutal life, Tarkeshere felt something unfamiliar, shame. He looked down at the human bleeding at his feet and realized that for all his strength, this small creature possessed a courage he could never replicate. He rose, towering over the medic, and then bowed his head. Then I will protect you, he said, the words emerging as a vow. Until your heart ceases, no fire shall touch you. Ward looked up at him through the smoke, disbelief softening into a tired smile. You don't have to. I already have, Tarkeshere said. And before Ward could reply, another explosion thundered nearby. The soldiers shouted for retreat. Tarkeshere scooped the medic up again, ignoring the protests. They ran toward the northern cliffs as the battlefield dissolved into chaos once more. The evac beacons flickered in the distance, faint and uncertain. Ward, half-conscious, watched the predator's face through the haze of dust and flame. The eyes that had once promised death now held something else entirely, purpose. He wanted to ask what that vow meant, why this creature who had ended wars now swore to save a single man. But the words never came. The world around them fell into smoke and silence, and only the rhythmic sound of Tarkeshere's footsteps remained. Somewhere in the back of his fading consciousness, Ward understood that what had just happened was more than survival. It was the birth of something the galaxy had forgotten, an oath not forged by command or fear but by choice. And in the heart of the inferno, the predator carried him forward, deeper into the fire that would test them both. The evacuation zone was a mirage in the storm, a fragile shimmer of light against the ruins. Smoke and plasma haze distorted the horizon, but Tarkeshere's eyes were made for such darkness. He carried Elias Ward across what was left of Korshan's surface, each step shaking loose embers from the ground. The human stirred weakly in his arms, blood soaking the bandages that bound his shoulder. Put me down, Ward muttered, voice hoarse. I can walk. You can barely breathe, Tarkeshere replied without slowing. Ward forced a ragged laugh. Then I'll limp enthusiastically. Tarkeshere hesitated, then set him down gently. The medic's boots sank into the ash. The air was thick enough to taste metal, smoke, and the faint sweetness of burning plastic. He adjusted his pack, swayed, and steadied himself on the predator's arm. See? Functional. You humans redefine fragility, Tarkeshere said, though there was something almost approving in his tone. Ward squinted toward the lights ahead. That's the evac zone. If we reach it, we can call off the bombardment on this sector. But we'll need to get through that. He pointed to the trench lines between them and the beacons, a battlefield still crawling with life. Drones swept low, scanning for movement. Wounded soldiers dragged themselves between craters. The Coalition and Zarth both had been shattered here, yet neither side surrendered. Tarkeshere scanned the scene. We cannot pass unseen. Then we don't, Ward said, tightening his grip on his medpack. We move fast, we help who we can, and we don't stop. The Predator's gaze flicked toward him. You would risk all for strangers. They're not strangers. They're the ones who'll remember who we were after this ends. For a moment, Tarkeshere said nothing. Then he nodded, lowering himself to all fours. Stay behind me. They entered the trenches as another orbital flare seared the clouds. Tarkeshere's massive frame absorbed the light like a moving wall. Ward followed close, weaving between bodies, checking pulses. Some were gone. Others clung to life with trembling fingers. He moved on instinct, inject, seal, breathe, move again. One Zarthian soldier, a young female barely half Tarkeshere's size, reached for Ward as he passed. Her voice rasped in her native tongue, a plea. Ward hesitated only a second before crouching. Easy, he said. You'll make it. Tarkeshere turned at the sound of her voice. For a heartbeat, his old instincts surged, the urge to finish what War had started. Then he saw Ward's hands working, calm and unafraid, and forced the violence down. When Ward looked up, Tarkeshere was already crouched beside them, shielding them both from falling debris. She is the enemy, Tarkeshere murmured. She's dying, Ward said. That's all that matters right now. Something broke inside the Predator's chest, an understanding so sharp it almost hurt. He looked down at the young soldier and saw, not a rival species, but a life just as fragile as any human's. He said nothing more. They pressed on. The air grew hotter, the sky flickered with the ghost of orbital fire. Tarkeshere took hits from shrapnel that would have killed a tank, but he did not slow. Ward's voice kept him moving, a steady rhythm of orders and breath. Left. Cover that man. Watch your flank. Tarkeshere obeyed each command without question, realizing somewhere along the line that this human, the one creature he could crush with one hand, had become the only voice he trusted. When they reached the outer perimeter, a barrage struck nearby, throwing both of them to the ground. Ward's vision blurred. He heard Tarkeshere's roar echo through the smoke, followed by the whine of collapsing metal. The Predator rose, bleeding, one arm useless but still standing. Ward crawled to his side, pressing a coagulant patch against the creature's ribs. You're losing blood. It is irrelevant, Tarkeshere said. The objective? Ward coughed hard, forcing air back into his lungs. The evac beacon. It's up there, on that ridge. We get to it, we can signal the ships. The ridge was a wall of flame and twisted metal. Tarkeshere studied it, then lowered himself so Ward could climb onto his back. Hold fast, he said. Ward hesitated. You sure about this? Tarkeshere's eyes flared. You swore to stop the fire. I swore to carry you through it. They moved. Tarkeshere charged through the inferno, leaping over fissures, crushing drones beneath his claws. Plasma bolts hissed through the air, grazing his armor, searing flesh. Ward clung tight, shouting directions between breaths. The ridge loomed closer, 20 meters then 10. A final explosion threw them both into the dirt. Tarkeshere rolled, shielding Ward with his body. The heat was unbearable even for him. He forced himself up again, panting, smoke rising from his armor. Ward tried to stand and failed. Go, the medic said weakly. You can still make it. Tarkeshere turned toward him, expression unreadable through the flames. And break my oath? Ward's hand trembled as he reached for the Predator's arm. If you stay, we both die. Then so be it. Tarkeshere knelt, lifting Ward once more. The human's protest faded against the roar of the fire. The Predator climbed the ridge, step by brutal step. His armor peeled away in plates, his claws scorched, but he did not stop. When they reached the summit, Ward saw the beacon tower flickering, half-melted but still functional. He crawled from Tarkeshere's arms, dragging himself to the control panel. Come on, he whispered. Work, damn you. He slammed his fist against the ignition switch. The beacon flared to life, sending a pulse of blue light into the heavens. In orbit, human ships would see it. They'd know survivors remained. Tarkeshere collapsed beside him, breathing shallowly. You have done it, he said. Ward turned toward him, horror dawning. The Predator's side was torn open, internal plates glowing with molten heat. No, Ward said, pressing a sealant patch uselessly against the wound. Don't you dare. We're not done. Tarkeshere looked at him, and for a moment, his eyes softened. When I was young, my people taught that mercy is weakness, that those who protect the weak are slaves to them. Now I see, his voice faltered. You are free in a way we never were. Save your breath, Ward said, forcing a med injector into the creature's arm. You're going to make it. The Predator's hand, massive and trembling, rested gently on Ward's shoulder. You, remind me what it is to live for something beyond survival. Then, as the first evacuation shuttles broke through the clouds above, Tarkeshere pushed Ward backward, off the ridge. The medic shouted as he tumbled down the slope. When he hit the ground, he looked up through the smoke and saw the Predator standing against the flames, one last time as the ridge erupted behind him. Ward screamed his name, but the sound vanished in the explosion. The ridge became a pillar of light. When the rescue crews found Ward hours later, he was still staring at the burning horizon. The beacon's pulse lit his face with blue light, steady and defiant. He didn't speak as they lifted him aboard. He didn't need to. The vow still echoed in his mind, etched into every heartbeat. Until your heart ceases, no fire shall touch you. And somewhere in the fire that promise still held. The world returned in fragments. White light. The hum of engines. The sterile scent of antiseptic. Elias Ward opened his eyes to the ceiling of a medical bay and thought, for one disoriented moment, that the fire was still burning. Then he realized the light wasn't from plasma storms, it was from hospital lamps. He tried to sit up, and agony lanced through his shoulder. Machines whirred disapprovingly. A nurse pressed him back onto the bed. Easy, Captain, she said gently. You're safe. The evac fleet picked you up 2 days ago. Ward blinked, trying to form words. The others? Tarkeshere? The nurse hesitated just long enough for him to understand. We recovered no Zarth bodies in the blast zone, she said. But you saved hundreds, maybe thousands. The beacon you activated ended the bombardment. Ward looked past her, to the viewport where space stretched endless and silent. Below, the planet Korshan was a dead ember. Ended, he murmured. That's what they're calling it. In the days that followed, news feeds across the coalition carried the same story, the Predator that ended wars. Every broadcast replayed the same edited footage. Tarkeshere shielding humans, Tarkeshere carrying the wounded, Tarkeshere vanishing in fire. He had become a legend overnight, the kind history bends into comfort. To the humans he was proof that even monsters could change. To the Zarth he was proof that strength meant nothing without purpose. Ward didn't believe in legends. He believed in what he saw, the smell of burnt flesh, the feel of Tarkeshere's heartbeat beneath his hands, the sound of that vow echoing through the inferno. He spent hours replaying those moments, asking himself why he'd survived when the one who saved him hadn't. Visitors came and went. Commanders offered commendations. Journalists requested interviews. Ward refused them all. His only focus was his recovery and the faint, irrational hope that Tarkeshere might still be out there. He asked every intelligence officer he could find about Zarth life signs, energy readings, traces of movement in the fire zones. The answers were always the same: nothing. On the 7th day he left the hospital against orders. The fleet had docked on Helion Station for repairs. Its observation deck overlooked Korshan's orbit, where a handful of ships still circled the ruined world. Ward stood at the viewport, his reflection pale against the void. Colonel Jansen, his commanding officer, approached quietly. You should be resting. Resting feels like surrender, Ward replied without turning. Jansen studied him for a moment. You know, the Council's making Tarkeshere a symbol of reconciliation. Statues, speeches, even treaties named after him. You were there when it happened. You'll be in those speeches too. Ward's jaw tightened. He didn't die to decorate parades. No, Jansen said. He died so they'd stop needing them. Ward finally faced him. And how long before we forget what it cost? The colonel sighed, tapping a data pad. Look, we can't bring him back. But we can honor what he stood for. The peace talks start tomorrow. The Zarth delegation asked for a human representative who knew him personally. They asked for you. Ward stared at the pad, its surface reflecting his face and the distant starfield beyond. He hadn't worn a uniform in days, yet somehow the weight of it still clung to him. "They think peace will come from signatures," he said quietly. He thought it came from action. "Then act," Jansen said. "Be the reason his story means something." That night Ward couldn't sleep. The hum of the station felt too quiet, too alive. He found himself in the cargo bay where recovered equipment from Korshan was being processed. Crates of melted armor, broken medpacks, twisted drone parts. And then, amid the debris he saw it, a fragment of black plating, scorched and curved. He knelt, brushing away ash. The metal still bore the faint outline of a painted symbol, the Terran medical insignia. Tarkeshere had worn it. Ward's throat tightened. The Predator hadn't just protected him. He had carried that symbol into battle, a declaration to friend and foe alike. Ward took the fragment and pressed it to his chest. "You stubborn bastard," he whispered. When morning came he stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was vast, filled with delegates from every surviving world. Holographic banners displayed the emblem of the new peace accords, a stylized image of a human hand and a Zarth claw interlocked. Ward's speech wasn't scripted. It wasn't even rehearsed. He stepped forward and spoke the only truth that mattered. The war didn't end because one side won. It ended because a creature we called a monster chose to save a man instead of killing him. Peace isn't written in treaties, it's carried, one act at a time, through the fire. The chamber was silent when he finished. Even the translators paused, unsure how to render the weight of his words into sound. Afterward, he returned to his quarters and sat with the fragment of Tarkeshere's armor on his desk. It gleamed faintly in the light, its edges smoothed by heat. He began recording a log entry, not as a report but as a letter. "This is Captain Elias Ward, Terran Relief Corps. If anyone finds this, know that Tarkeshere of the Zarth Dominion saved more lives than any soldier in this war. He didn't do it for glory or forgiveness. He did it because someone showed him mercy first. I hope, wherever his people hear this, they understand what he became." He ended the recording and sent it to both human and Zarth archives. Then, for the first time since Korshan, he allowed himself to sleep. Weeks passed. The peace talks solidified into treaties. The fleets withdrew. Korshan was declared a neutral memorial world. Ward was offered promotions, honors, a place in history. He refused them all. Instead, he requested assignment to the humanitarian front rebuilding Zarth colonies. He wanted to see what Tarkeshere had died believing in. As his transport descended onto a quiet Zarth world months later, Ward stood at the viewport and watched alien children chasing drones across the landing field. Their laughter rang sharp and clear in the thin atmosphere. It was the first sound of peace he had ever heard. He stepped onto the soil and felt the weight of Korshan fall from his shoulders, replaced by something heavier but truer, the responsibility of the living. He carried Tarkeshere's armor fragment in his coat pocket, the painted human emblem still visible beneath the scorch marks. To others it was a relic of war. To Ward it was a promise. He looked at the horizon where the first colony shelters rose like silver ribs against the sunset. "If he believed we were worth saving," Ward said softly, "then I'll spend the rest of my life proving him right." The wind swept across the plains, carrying the faint scent of rain, a rare gift on a world still healing. Ward closed his eyes and listened. Somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, he could almost hear Tarkeshere's voice again, deep and steady, whispering the vow that had outlived them both. "Until your heart ceases, no fire shall touch you." Ward opened his eyes. The fires of war were gone, but their heat remained in memory, a light to guide what came next. He walked toward the colony, the sky behind him clearing for the first time in years. The transport's engines fell silent as dusk bled across the alien horizon. Elias Ward stood alone beside the half-constructed shelter, watching the pale twin suns dip below the jagged cliffs. The colony was quiet now, its workers retired for rest, leaving only the rhythmic whisper of the wind through metal scaffolds. He had come here to build peace from the bones of ruin, but peace, he was learning, wasn't built easily. It demanded patience and grief, and faith that the living could be better than their memories. He reached into his coat pocket, feeling the scorched fragment of Tarkeshere's armor. The metal was cool now, smoothed by months of touch. It was his anchor. His reminder that the galaxy's deadliest predator had once carried him through the flames because of a single act of compassion. That was the truth beneath every speech, every treaty, not politics but choice. The choice to save instead of destroy. The colony comms tower flickered with static, a sign of incoming transmission. Ward sighed, setting aside his work. He crossed the dusty outpost yard and activated the console. The holographic screen sputtered to life, revealing a familiar emblem, the Terran Coalition crest, and beneath it an encrypted message marked Eyes Only, Captain Elias Ward. The voice that emerged was low and tense. Captain, this is Commander Hale. You need to hear this before the Council buries it. A reconnaissance team recovered data from the Korshan surface, signal fragments consistent with Zarth biotech. The readings matched Tarkeshare's neural pattern. Ward froze. The words didn't register at first. That's impossible, he said quietly. He was vaporized in the blast. Apparently not, Hale replied. The pattern's weak, but it's moving, beneath the crust in one of the sealed subterranean vaults. Officially, the Council's calling it residual energy. Unofficially, they're sending in retrieval units. Ward's pulse quickened. Retrieval? You mean capture? You know how the Council works, Hale said grimly. If Tarkeshare's alive, they'll want to control him. Dissect him if they have to. I thought you deserved to know first. The transmission ended, leaving only the crackle of static and Ward's reflection in the fading light. He stared at the comms console, every thought in him narrowing to a single purpose. If Tarkeshare lived, if even a fragment of him survived, then he wouldn't let the galaxy's bureaucracy decide his fate. By the time night fell, Ward had already packed. He left a brief message for the colony overseer, humanitarian reassignment. Emergency retrieval operation. He didn't elaborate. There was no need. The transport shuttle lifted off before dawn, vanishing into the violet haze of the stratosphere. The journey to Korshan took 2 days. When the blackened planet rose into view, Ward felt his chest tighten. The world that had ended wars still smoldered, its surface a mosaic of ash and glass. He piloted his ship through the ruins of orbiting debris, memories clawing at him with every passing shadow. He landed near the coordinates Hale had sent, an old underground research vault buried beneath a collapsed ridge. The air outside shimmered with residual radiation. His suit filtered the toxins, but the heat still clung to him like a ghost. Inside the vault, silence reigned. The corridors were carved from obsidian stone, half melted by the bombardment. Ward's boots echoed against the floor as he descended deeper, flashlight cutting through the dark. At the lowest level, the path opened into a vast chamber, a sanctum of alien design, lit by faint bioluminescent veins running through the walls. In its center lay a containment pod, cracked but humming with weak energy. Inside, curled and motionless, was Tarkeshare. Ward's breath caught. The creature looked diminished, half its body fused with regenerative gel, scales dulled and torn. Yet the unmistakable pulse beneath the translucent casing proved it was alive. Barely. He stepped closer, his gloved hand trembling as it touched the pod's surface. "You stubborn bastard," he whispered. "You actually kept your promise." The console beside the pod flickered to life, translating ancient Zarth runes into a rough Terran approximation. Neural restoration cycle incomplete. External interference may destabilize subject. Ward hesitated. To open the pod risked killing Tarkeshare. But if the Council's retrieval unit arrived first, they'd finish the job differently. He drew a slow breath, then entered the override command. "If you can hear me, old friend," he said softly, "it's time to come home." The chamber lights dimmed as the pod hissed open, steam curling into the air. The scent of scorched metal filled the room. Tarkeshare's eyes snapped open, burning gold beneath the haze. For a second neither moved. Then in a voice like grinding stone, the Zarth spoke. "Elias? Ward." Ward exhaled a laugh of disbelief. "You always were too damn hard to kill." Tarkeshare tried to rise but collapsed. Ward caught him, supporting the creature's immense weight against his shoulder. "Easy," he said. "You've been asleep for months." The Predator's gaze hardened. "The war ended?" Ward nodded. "Because of you." A shadow passed through Tarkeshare's expression. Grief, perhaps, or something older. Then peace must be guarded. Even from those who would claim to protect it. The sound of engines echoed through the tunnels, distant, mechanical, growing louder. Ward cursed under his breath. Council retrieval team. "They're early." Tarkeshare's nostrils flared. "They will not understand." "Then we make them," Ward said, checking his blaster. "Together like before." The first soldiers broke through the vault door, their visors reflecting the pod's dying light. Orders shouted, weapons raised. Ward and Tarkeshare moved as one, human precision and alien instinct intertwined. Energy bolts scorched the air, Tarkeshare's claws shattered armor like glass. Ward fired with surgical accuracy, covering the Zartha's flank. When the smoke cleared, the chamber lay silent again. The team was gone, disarmed, stunned, but alive. Ward turned to Tarkeshere, chest heaving. You could have killed them. They were not my enemy, Tarkeshere said quietly. Only lost. Ward nodded, his throat tight. Then let's get out before they find more. Together they climbed from the vault into the open night. The stars above were the same, though the world below had changed beyond recognition. Tarkeshere looked up at the sky, his gaze both feral and weary. You still carry the fire, Elias Ward. But tell me, when does it end? When we stop needing to fight for it, Ward said. Until then, we keep carrying each other. A low rumble split the clouds, a fleet descending, bright with council insignia. Tarkeshere glanced at Ward. Go. They will not stop hunting me. Ward shook his head. Then they'll have to hunt us both. He activated the beacon on his wrist. Their shuttle rose from the crater, engines flaring against the dark. Tarkeshere stepped aboard beside him, massive silhouette framed against the inferno-lit sky. As the ship broke atmosphere, Ward glanced at his companion. The legend had returned, not as a weapon but as a testament. Tarkeshere met his gaze and gave the faintest nod. Through the fire, he said. Ward smiled. Together. The stars swallowed them whole, and below, Korshan burned for the last time, not in destruction but in rebirth,